When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico hard in 2017, killing more than 3,000 people and leveling much of the island, Donald Trump said his administration was giving the U.S. territory all the support it needed.
We're doing really well on Puerto Rico.
We are sending tremendous amounts of supplies.
Tremendous progress being made.
As far as Puerto Rico is concerned, that's been going, as you know, really well.
But while he was patting himself on the back, throwing rolls of paper towels at hurricane survivors, a recent Inspector General report found that Trump was intentionally stalling as much as $20 billion in federal aid, a lot of which is only now starting to be released. And when Puerto Rican leaders dared to criticize his response, he called them political ingrates, specifically the then mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín Cruz, who said the Trump administration's inefficient response was killing people.
We're dying here. We truly are dying here. It's not a good story. When people are dying, when people are starving, when people are thirsty, please help us.
When that help didn't come, many renewed calls to give the island greater autonomy. And now, as you know, there are bills before Congress that would do just that by giving Puerto Ricans the option to choose statehood, independence, or a version of what they now have. Carmen Yulín Cruz is now in Massachusetts for a one-year fellowship at Mount Holyoke College. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for being here.
Very nice for having me. When you showed those photographs and the video, it's still, and my Puerto Rican flag behind me, it still touches my heart. I have a little post-it in front of me, which of course you can't see, and it says, for the 3,000. Every day, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of how that could have been avoided.
When you read this report last week, I'm sure it didn't surprise you at all. Where do you think the animus came from with Donald Trump? Why did he have it in for the people of Puerto Rico?
Well, I've been asked that question, and at the beginning, I didn't want to answer what was inherently in my soul. Donald Trump was racist. He is also ignorant about the relationship that Puerto Rico and the United States has. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. We are a U.S. territory, which is a euphemism for calling us a colony. We probably are the last standing colony in the world. And I don't think he knew very much that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. When some reporter asked him, he visibly seemed surprised. But even if he didn't know any of that, there is an innate human quality. When people are in need, you just offer the help. You don't ask for it. FEMA was asking us for memos when we have no electricity, so we couldn't even write in our computers. And what was unthinkable to me is that while the American people were finding a way to help, from Boston, from Chicago, from New York, from all over, the Trump administration was saying that there were unsurmountable logistical reasons for why they couldn't get the help to Puerto Rico. But then people were getting the help. So we make a very huge distinction between the failings of the Trump administration and the big heart of the American people.
I'm sure you've thought a lot, and I'm sure many in Puerto Rico have thought about what would it take to ensure that the future of the people of Puerto Rico is not dependent upon the whims of an individual leader. And I assume it rests in what is the status of Puerto Rico going forward. Where are you on this whole issue of statehood versus independence versus, I don't know, an enhanced version of what we have now?
Well, there's a fourth option, which is free association.
Yeah.
It is a compact between the U.S. and Puerto Rico. It would be. I believe in free association. I believe that Puerto Ricans have to bring something to the table as well as being able to participate of whatever happens. For example, one of the things that Puerto Rico could continue to be and is right now, not as much as it used to be, but a haven for pharmaceuticals. The problem is that pharmaceuticals then have looked at that haven in terms of looking at their profits and putting them in a place where they didn't pay U.S. income tax. So I believe in free association. But even more than that, I believe in a process of self-determination, which, as you mentioned, Congresswoman Nidia Velázquez and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez have put forth, where all the voices in Puerto Rico will be heard, and Puerto Ricans, we have the opportunity to decide. One of the things that they tell us is, the people that are pro-statehood, is that we will continue to have Spanish as the first language of Puerto Rico, and that we will continue to participate in such things as the Olympics. And we all know that's not true. So one of the good things of having a process like the one put forth by Nidia Velázquez is that Congress for the first time will say yes or no to how they would perceive the transition to each one of these options.
But if it turns out on the statehood issue, I'm sure you saw a recent poll of all Americans that, surprisingly to me, by a pretty significant margin, 45 to 30, said they supported statehood for Puerto Rico. A recent, I think, in a long series of non-binding referenda of the Puerto Rican people themselves, I think there was a narrow margin for statehood. So why could there not be something crafted that would ensure that the things that you worry about losing, like the language, for example, be guaranteed in return for representation in Congress? And by the way, people of Puerto Rico pay payroll taxes. It isn't like they don't pay taxes to the United States. The ability to vote in a presidential election. Why couldn't such a deal be crafted that protected the rights that you think are important, but also granted full representation?
Well, I think that could be crafted in a free association package, but I'll answer your question straightforward. Puerto Rico is a nation invaded by the United States and previously invaded by Spain. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is not a civil rights issue, but a human rights issue. It's different in D.C. D.C., we're talking about a civil rights issue. And listen, I can understand from the American vantage point, and after seeing the horrible situation that transpired in Puerto Rico, I can understand that many Americans would think the answer is to give Puerto Rico statehood. If we're talking about a nation that was invaded, the least that one could do is give those people, by those people, I mean the Puerto Rican people, the opportunity to decide on the basis of true commitments. But I believe that, as you said, it could be crafted under a free association.
Understood. Okay, I only have a minute left, but people know how you felt about Donald Trump, and you've said in numerous interviews that people died because of how Donald Trump treated the people of Puerto Rico. You were the co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Yes.
How do you feel about the Biden presidency 100 days in, particularly as relates to Puerto Rico?
Well, first of all, let me say that Bernie Sanders just put forth a piece of legislation that will also help all of the territories, not only Puerto Rico, all of the territories, to gain equal access to certain things that absolutely are unalienable rights. But the Biden administration has been trying very hard to move past the sins of the past. And they are taking steps to ensure that the people of Puerto Rico receive, and as you mentioned, the money that was committed and the money that we deserve. Most people forget that FEMA is not help. When you pay for your mortgage, you're paying for FEMA. It's an insurance. And a lot of the things that I think that we need to do from the standpoint of this administration is look at what went wrong in Puerto Rico, devastatingly wrong, and how we can move forward in saving lives. So I'm hopeful that the Biden administration has taken steps, some not literally having to do with Puerto Rico, like increasing the minimum wage to $15 for every contract. That is going to not be directly to Puerto Rico, but it will impact favorably on the people of Puerto Rico.
Carmen Yulín Cruz, you were an inspiration, not just to the people of your city, but to a lot of people in the mainland, too. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And one last thing. The American people need to know that we know the difference, that we know their hearts, that we know they're hardworking people, and that I will never forget the 327 AFL-CIO workers that left their homes, took vacation. And look, I tell you, and I get to feed us and take care of our wounds and make sure that more people did not die. And for that, as a Puerto Rican and as the mayor of the city of San Juan, I will always be thankful.
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.